Recent occurrences in reverse and on the Crimean Peninsula provided evidence of this. An assault on Crimea was initiated by Ukrainian draws shortly after a military exercise conducted by the Russian military, during which Russian troops were also ambushed and acquired. Each day, the Ukrainian army receives reinforcements, which also contributes to the growing ferocity of the conflict. Let's examine what's going on in both the present and the past on the Crimean Peninsula as a member of the Anchor Daily News. We would like to make a request before analyzing how these recent events will affect the trajectory of the war. As a result of our expert consultants and official sources in the field of the war in Russia and Ukraine, we are able to provide our valuable viewers with up-to-date information regarding developments in the conflict zones. You can thank our team and help us continue our work by using the Super Tank button to provide financial. After the Russian occupiers made false statements that they had captured Bakhmut, the level of fighting that was taking place in Bakhmut increased in intensity. The Ukrainian military has increased its presence in the rear with valiant soldiers who are armed with the most modern equipment and weapons. This is due to the fact that Zelensky, the leader of the Ukrainians, views retreat as a fortress in the Ukrainian army does not want to lose this fortress, so the Russian army is making an effort to occupy it back, motivated its troops and launch attacks that have not been successful thus far. The other day, incompetent Russian commanders attempted to invest in a new offensive system, but they were unsuccessful once again because the Ukrainian army was aware of everything. The Russian invaders attempted to attack various points of the document in groups of 10 with the intention of making more efficient use of their diminishing number of soldiers. The plan was for approximately 5 groups, each consisting of 10 people, to approach the Ukrainian positions in a stealthy manner. They were completely unaware of the effect that was directly above their heads. Yes, vehicles in the sky without humans aboard at all times. Members of the Aerial Reconnaissance Unit of the Ukrainian Border Guard Service can be seen operating reconnaissance drones in the air above the country's western border. The drones were successful in capturing each of the 5 groups of Russian invaders. Ukrainian reconnaissance drones were tracking all of the movements of the 5 groups of Russian invaders in real time as they approached Ukrainian position. The Russian invaders were attempting to approach the Ukrainian positions in a quiet and unsuccessful manner. It would have been sufficient for the artillery units to take action in order to blow up the invaders if they had been discovered by the Aerial Reconnaissance Unit. But the Ukrainian army, which is comprised of seasoned soldiers, waited for the most opportune moment as they always. The mortars fired by the Ukrainian Air Force struck the coordinates, which had been determined by the reconnaissance drones during the assault. The majority of the Russian invaders were wiped out by explosions. The few Russian soldiers that were still present were driven out of the region with great success, despite the fact that Russian commanders tried a variety of different strategies with the few soldiers. They were ultimately unsuccessful. They are doomed to fail in their conflict with the Ukrainian army because the Ukrainian army continues to improve in terms of both the number of soldiers and the quality of their equipment. On February 24, which marks the beginning of the war, the Russian military is making preparations for a major. It is necessary to capture Bakhmut in order to realize these attacks and ultimately accomplish what Putin has in mind for his country. Because of this, the area surrounding Bakhmut and Bakhmut itself has been the site of significant fighting over the past 2 to 3 months. The Ukrainian army exerts a significant amount of influence over the boss back. Officials from Ukraine continue to release statements regarding the current situation in Bakhmut as well as other regions. Yuri SSC, an advisor to the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense, recently made statements that the Russian armed forces are gearing up for a major offensive stated that the Russians are eager to make progress in the conflict before the 1-year anniversary of this aggress. They don't even have time to train the newly mobilized soldiers, so they're just tossing them into the area to use as cannon fodder. There are numerous images of fields around Bakhmut that are filled with Russian bodies on the Crimean Peninsula. There has been a new development taking place while the Russian occupiers are suffering casualties and retreating over the course of the past few. Drones used for reconnaissance have been flown over the Crimean Peninsula by the Ukrainian armed forces. This is due to the fact that Zelensky's objective is to regain control of Crimea, which the Russian occupiers unlawfully annexed in the year 2040. Zelensky has stated on multiple occasions that the war will not end until Crimea Peninsula is. Recently, drones belonging to the Ukrainian military conducted reconnaissance over the territory of Crimea. The attack is about to happen. The Russian military claimed that their operation to shoot down Ukrainian drones over Crimea was a success. However, this operation was not a success because the Ukrainian army had already crossed the occupied territories and reached the Crimean Peninsula before the drones were shot. The fact that Russian forces were able to shoot down Ukrainian drones while they were flying over Crimea was a success for Ukraine, not Russia, due to the fact that this situation demonstrated the advancement of the Ukrainian army. In his statement on this new development, Michael Roswell, the occupying governor of the Sebastopol region, unwittingly admitted that the Russian occupiers have shifted from an offensive position to a defensive position, Ralph. Over the water, 2 Ukrainian military aircraft were shot down by enemy fire. The assaults are being successfully repelled by our armed forces. Since the beginning of the conflict, the Ukrainian army has launched 12 separate assaults on various locations across the Crimean Peninsula as a result of the Ukrainian army's successful. Numerous military installations, airports and ammunition storage facilities located on the peninsula have been leveled on the Crimea Peninsula. The city of Sevastopol was the location of one of these attacks that took place about 3 months ago on the Crimea Peninsula. Sevastopol serves as the location of the military command post. Therefore, the transformers in this region were the focus of the Ukrainian army's A. The drones operated by the Ukrainian military did a lot of damage to the transformers when they bombed them the other day. Michael Rea, the occupant of the Sevastopol region, as well as a cat, released a statement in which he discussed the transformers that were struck exactly 3 months ago. According to Rosario, a number of the towns in the Sevastopol region are experiencing issues with their electric. Even the civilian government on the Crimean Peninsula is a testament to the achievements of the Ukrainian armed forces. The Russian occupiers are losing ground in Crimea, as demonstrated by the announcement made by Roswelzia last month regarding the construction of a military hospital with 150 beds in Sevastopol. In addition, the final month of the year 2022 saw the construction of a brand new hospital in Seva. There is not enough space in hospitals for wounded Russian military personnel. Vladimir Putin, the leader of Russia, is understandably shaken by the rising death toll in his country. Since the beginning of the conflict, the Russian army has suffered a loss of approximately 150,000 soldiers in addition to tons of them. In Russia, smoke from wildfires has become an everyday occurrence. Russia is now a part of the conflict. The fact that anti-aircraft systems were installed on buildings in the streets of Moscow by Putin was also an acknowledgement that the conflict had spread to Russia. The fear that Russian leader Putin inspires is demonstrated once more in a report written by Russian journalist Raj Donves. Since the beginning of the conflict, Putin is said to have made very infrequent use of the presidential plane. It is said that since the beginning of the conflict, Vladimir Putin has used the presidential plane very infrequently due to his fear of being killed while flying through the air. According to Rosen Betsky, Vladimir Putin tours the country in an armored train. She also mentioned that the psychological reason for using this train is because he is concerned that someone may be watching him, that his aircraft may be monitored and that his aircraft may be forced to land. It would appear that Russia is unable to invade Ukraine given that its leader is a coward, and that its military is comprised of inexperienced soldiers. But Vladimir Putin, the leader of Russia, is not going to back down from his decision to invade for the sake of his own career. When one considers the conflict as a whole, it is obvious that Russia will be confronted with significant challenges in the days to come. What are your thoughts? Will it be possible for Ukraine to reclaim control of its territory in Crimea? Will there be a complete withdrawal from Batman by Russia? What is the next step that Putin and the Russian army, which is losing strength by the day in that region, are planning to? We are interested in hearing your point of view. Keep up with us here for further updates. The Anchor Daily News YouTube channel is the owner of any and all rights to these videos. We do not rely on any other social media publications, and our usernames for Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook are all located at the Anchor Daily News. We take legal action against every website and channel that utilizes it without our authorization. The current status of the war favors Ukraine's advancement at this point. The Russian invasion that was trying to take over Mamu was nearly entirely successful in being stopped. In spite of these attempts to invent something new, the Ukrainian UF battalion has delivered the most devastating blow too. This time, the Ukrainian army was responsible for blowing up the primary Chechen headquarters. Hundreds of Chechens were killed during this conflict. Additionally, the Chechens reached the sites almost immediately after it caused a significant crisis for the Russian army, Russia. Since the beginning of the conflict in Ukraine, Russia's primary objective has been to take control of the city of Bakhmut, which is located in one of the most strategic regions of the country. Because of its strategic location in the occupation zone and the abundance of natural resources, it possesses. This city functions in a very real sense as a gold. It comes as a surprise to the invading Russian forces that the UF battalion is waiting for them when they tried to get their hands on this gold. But they had no idea that thousands of Chechens who have formed the basis of recent operations by the Ukrainian army would be organized to protect Bakhmut. The reason for this is due to the fact that Bakhmut is not only the geographic center of this region, but there are also two significant forces that Ukraine must contend with in this. These Chechens are supporters of Kadi and are sympathetic to the Russian government, and directly in front of them is the Sheikh Mansour battalion, which despises Kadi and Putin. The two most powerful forces in the region are two of the most significant aspects of the political crisis that is taking place in Chi. In particular, the goal of the Sheikh Mansour battalion is for Ukraine to regain its independence and to rid itself of Putin, who has been responsible for a significant amount of destruction in this nation. To put it another way, the fact that the majority of the world's population is located on Bahamut is not a mere coincidence. The Ukraine government has initiated a number of coordinated reforms in an effort to tilt the global balance of power in its. At the start of these steps, very serious equipment was deployed in the cities of Luhansk and Dansk. There will soon be agents here. The Ukrainian army has effectively cut off the invaders' access to many of the areas that they used as hiding places. Even though Putin ordered his troops to take a defensive position, it was not enough to ensure the Russians. As a result of the fact that Wagner Group mercenaries and pro-Russian Chechens are typically the combatants in this region, the Russian soldiers have been facing a very serious shortage of personal military ammunition and racial support, which was caused by the fact that these supplies could not be sent to this region from the center of Russia in this part of the world, to be unable to demonstrate adequate levels of F. On the other hand, Ukraine made the most of this opportunity and launched counterattack, which resulted in significant casualties for the Russian army allegedly. However, when he learned about Putin's thoughts for mercenaries, a significant number of Chechens' perspectives on the world shifted since the beginning of the. Russia has been employing mercenaries in the regions of the conflict in which it has lost ground and sustained significant casualties, mercenaries who were cognizant of the current circumstances. Again, in order to cause a great deal of confusion within the Russian army, the soldiers who did not listen to the commanders harassed other soldiers in the army. This resulted in the operations coming up against significant challenges and unexpected. In spite of the fact that all of these factors have been taken into account, it has been determined that the Russian army has been unsuccessful in achieving even the victories that it was capable of attaining those responsible for these points in the conflict in Ukraine. In Bakhmut expressed that Russia had lost thousands of soldiers there. The Ukrainian Air Force, which hosted revolutionary events, is primarily responsible for this world's current. The Ukrainian Air Force attacked a large number of invading forces, hiding places in the regions of Donetsk, Luhansk, and Kherson. However, the dispatching of unmanned aerial vehicles in rapid succession to Kady Ross's primary military headquarters in the Luhansk region was the most extreme action that had been taken up to this point. This headquarters held a significant amount of importance for Kady, and the pro-Russian Chechen, who is serving as president of Chechnya at the moment, has made an attempt to respond to me. The airstrikes were successful. However, this has not been sufficient to prevent losses as a direct result of the attacks that were organized by the Ukrainian Air Force in October and September. Particularly in the Donbas region, CURO suffered the loss of tens of tons of ammunition, as well as hundreds of soldiers. In September and October, Kady Roth has hundreds of soldiers at his disposal. Because of the circumstances, he had no choice but to leave the area. Kady Roth, who has headquarters in a number of different locations, does not have a headquarters presence any longer in the sword of Ukraine. ZPO is the site of yet another very large operation that the Ukrainian ground forces have signed off. The Ukrainian military made use of Toku systems in order to accomplish this mission successfully. Due to the significance of this operation, Kady Roth suffered the total destruction of a very large headquarters. Estimates suggest that the Ukrainian Army Force used its flagship to make a very serious observation in the region, which is the same area where it had actively collected intelligence in the. Information obtained from within the company suggests that hundreds of dollars are spent on the software channel while the procedure is being performed. Typing about 205 Chechen soldiers are said to have perished as a direct consequence of this explosion, according to the information that was gathered from the area. Because of this situation, Kady Roth started putting the Chechens to, which resulted in a huge crisis among the Chechen people. In the midst of this, as is the case at every previous juncture, the Chechens whom he had duped with a great number of lies and promises are now gradually beginning to wake up because Kady Roth has completely lost control. Kady Roth, who has been attempting to mislead people with various forms of propaganda ever since the conflict, is finally starting to taste the bitter fruit of their lack of faith in him. However, this may also be partially attributable to the fact that Kady Roth's attitude has shifted and that Kady Roth no longer makes statements using his previous fate. It has become so difficult for Quadro to recover from their recent string of defeats that it is now almost impossible for them to do so, despite the fact that it is to Ukraine's advantage that Kady Roth was unable to display his old. Despite this, Quadro was forced to side with Russia in this invasion because Putin has been dangling the prospect of wealth, power, and prosperity in front of Kady Roth for a very long time. As a result, Kady is required to take part in this occupation regardless of whether or not he wants to, in spite of the fact that Ukrainian intelligence officials have advanced numerous hypotheses regarding this. The Kremlin has consistently opposed those hypotheses, but the fact that Chechens are playing such an active role in a world that is not related to them has started to surprise everyone according to the information that we have obtained. We are aware that Quadro was entrusted with two critical responsibilities. First and foremost is the assassination of the Ukrainian president, that Amir Zelensky was responsible. This is a very important task because Zelensky was the one who made Putin back down in many different areas, which is why Ukraine was able to resist and receive such support during the war. Thanks to him, however, his insistence on Crimea made it possible for the work to proceed. Zelensky has the potential to cause a significant amount of disruption in Moscow thanks to the power that he possesses. As a result of this fear, the administration in the Kremlin is doing everything in its power to eradicate the landscape because Putin is capable of destroying Kadyrov if he tries to resist making a deal with him. Kadyrov had no other option but to accept the deal. A think tank in Brussels has come to the conclusion that Kadyrov is a hero from the adult world. Kadyrov is a hero from the very beginning to the very end. Even Kadyrov's opposition to Putin will be enough to bring him back down to zero according to the organization, which claims that Putin is also the source of the heroism that is being attributed to him. Kadyrov is now one of Putin's most important men, and Wagner founder Yevgeny Ferguson is already another one of Putin's most important. Whoever is responsible for both of these names becoming so wealthy and possessing an army will be put in. To put it another way, the actions that Vladimir Putin will take in regard to expansionist policies and the equal trials were obviously already taken years ago on this topic. There is a very tense atmosphere due to the fact that a very serious claim was made. The current predicament in Chechnya is such that no one wants Kad. A significant number of Chechens who are opposed to Kadyrov join the Shakeman or battalion in order to escape to the opposing camp. This demonstrates once more that the people who work in the stylists are unhappy with the monarchical rule of Kadyrov. Anyway, there is just one explanation for how Kal rose to power, and was able to maintain his position once he got. In a mission of the highest level, the Rojas Terminator was successfully eliminated not long after it became public knowledge that Putin was collaborating with various criminal organizations. The most recent events have led to a significant weakening of the Russian armed forces. The Russian military is in a significant state of disarray as a direct result of a string of aircraft loss. After receiving this information, Putin wants to go crazy because very serious developments have begun to take place in the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. Since the beginning of the conflict, Russia has been discussing the possibility of developing an infantry weapon that is unstoppable. New developments. You have demonstrated that this weapon has been incapacitated and rendered use. The footage captured by the drone, which received a great deal of attention in Ukraine, was widely distributed. This point in time, the particulars of the operation once again demonstrated the high level of professionalism displayed by Ukraine. In every respect, an infantry unit from Russia's elite 19th Tank Division was the one who owned the destroyed Terminator that Russia boasted. Because of this most recent turn of events, it has been demonstrated once more that the Ukrainian army is significantly more active, particularly on the front. But where are the battle lines? To delve a little deeper into the significance of this move, Russia had initially stated that it would not stand against Ukraine after it had initially announced that it would not stand against Ukraine, and then unveiled the Terminator with a lot of public. But on the grounds that it was getting close to the Kremenna region in Moscow's northeastern outskirts, it was practically thrown into the conflict. It is reasonable to assume that the explosion of such an advanced weapon provides a significant boost to the morale of the Ukrainian troops. Nevertheless, it has not yet been determined precisely which Ukrainian unit was responsible for firing this weapon. We believe that the Ukraine used Octopus to take out these weapons because it is common knowledge that kamikaze-style unmanned aerial vehicles, UAVs, have a high rate of success in disabling a large number of weapons that are located behind the front lines. The fact that this video was taken by military drones while they were conducting surveillance behind enemy lines is the primary contributor to the existing level of UNC. It is believed that the Guards regiments in the area were responsible for organizing the operation that led to the destruction of the Terminator. However, it is not known for certain which unit was responsible for organizing the mission. As a result, the fact that UK Davis, which have long established themselves, particularly in terms of intelligence, as serious successes in such operations, should not come as a surprise to. Already an octopus is one of the primary factors that contributed to the significance of the Russian-Ukrainian war. Even before that, Ukraine referred to Wagner as a criminal organization due to the fact that it was proven with evidence that Wagner interfered in world politics in many different areas and committed very serious war crimes with mercenaries. When Ukraine announced this to the Wagner was described as a criminal organism. The reactions of the entire world to Wagner came one after the other. It is believed that Wagner made greater use of violent elements as the Ukraine gained the upper hand on the battlefield with Octopus. This demonstrates that your mind has begun to implement the revolutionary change that was made at UK Davis. Both from a tactical and an operational point of view, the conflict between Russia and Ukraine is among the most significant conflicts that have ever taken place. The Ukrainian military, which has grown significantly as a result of the assistance it has received from Western nations, has started the process of adding a completely. The war was complicated by a variety of factors. At this juncture, the utilization of unmanned aerial vehicles in conjunction with decommissioning is the most significant component. The fact that it was the first war to make extensive use of unmanned aerial vehicles is probably the single most important factor in explaining why it is referred to as modern war. The fact that these weapons are so effective at a time when it is speculated that people won't engage in violent conflict with one another in the future lends credence to these rumors. But since we're already here, why don't we take a look at the reasons why Terminator is such a big deal? Since the conflict began, Russia has been bragging about how successful its arms industry has been. However, contrary evidence can be found in the daily Russian troops are taking severe hits and are being forced to withdraw from the battlefield. As a result of the fact that the Ukrainian army has started to utilize all of the materials that they abandoned during their retreat, it is anticipated that the Terminator will cross into Ukraine at some point in the not-too-distant future. Because of the characteristics of this weapon and the potential impact it could have on Russia, this is one of Russia's greatest concerns. Our such estimate. The Ukrainian army was given a nightmare by Moscow's fearsome Terminator and 982,155mm precision-guided howitzer projectiles, which are considered to be the standard by N. The designer of the weapon asserts that its purpose is to transport Russian infantry to the battlefield in complete safety, while simultaneously overwhelming the adversary with tremendous firepower and superior optics. Despite this, Russia consistently sabotages any attempts made by the Ukrainian army to clear the area. The qualitative advancement of the Ukrainian army, which is rumored to be capable of inflicting damage even in this heavily defended region is something that is worthy of praise. It is common knowledge that Russia has been using Terminator for a considerable amount of time to cover artillery fire. However, the soldiers who were guarding Terminator did not anticipate that Davis would be able to deliver such a powerful blow. According to reports, Ukrainian forces operating along that front line employed kamikaze drones in their assault on the Termin. The Terminator was not affected by this attack totally naked, which worked best when used at a distance, and the inundate attack, which involved multiple chemicalized units heading toward the area. A significant number of the units that were tasked with protecting the Terminator flooded the Kremlin chose not to issue any statement regarding this. If this is the weapon that the Kremlin places the most faith in, then it is unavoidable that Ukraine will emerge victorious from this conflict with the assistance that it is receiving. The destructive potential of these weapons, which Russia's statements about the Terminator at the time allegedly claimed to have, was brought to light in a striking manner. The Kremlin has stated on multiple occasions that it produced approximately 300 of them, and included this information in their inventory beginning in 2018. After that, he stated that they had sold this weapon to 2 different nations, but this claim has been refuted by a number of different intelligence agencies. Only about 100 of these weapons were reportedly manufactured, and none of them were exported to any other countries as stated by Ukrainian and other agencies. The Kremlin was said to be carrying out yet another perception operation with this move. This is due to the fact that nearly the entire world is aware that such Russian propaganda does not contain any. Russia has long claimed that it possesses the second most powerful military in the world, a position it has held for a very long time. However, ever since it started fighting with Ukraine, it has become abundantly clear that this characterization is wholly inaccurate. According to analysts of warfare, Russia has demonstrated that many of its self-produced units are simply overrated. Despite the fact that it is poorly equipped to respond to the much-touted Asia-25s that are being shot down every day by the Ukrainian army, the Ukrainian military is currently engaged in operations. The utilization of Octopus has the potential to act as a roadmap for future conflict. A good number of these presumptions are going to be accepted up until the point where a future conflict causes them to shift once more.